千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. I would like to extend a warm welcome to everybody. Thank you for joining us. I want to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all gather together in this sacred Tao process. Tao Te Ching, chapter 57. Let me talk about the Chinese chapter title. So the Chinese chapter title is usually not included in translations. And because of that, I also do not include them in my own translation. But now I think it's actually very useful, very handy to talk about the chapter title. It definitely sheds light into the contents, the intent of the chapter. A lot of times people will ask, well, how do you know that this is what Lao Tzu was really trying to say? Other people have different interpretations than the one that you presented. I can sometimes use the chapter title, point to that, and say, well, if Lao Tzu did not mean to express what I say he's expressing, the chapter title will not be what it is. And usually they would be surprised. What? There's a chapter title? I thought just the chapter number. Nope. So here for 57, 治国章 is the title in Chinese. So 3 characters, no alternative title this time. The 3 characters, the first character there means to rule or govern. The second character means country, nation, empire, or sovereign state. So you can pretty much mix and match among the possible translations of those 2 characters. So the one that I picked is rule the kingdom. But if you want to translate as something different, like govern the country, that's totally fine and is still accurate. In the Tao, to rule the kingdom is a metaphor that reflects on you taking charge of your life. The bottom line is this: you are the sovereign of your own destiny. To recognize your power, take the reins, and be in control of your own existence, that is what it means to be truly sovereign. Now, when I describe it like that, taking charge, taking the reins, being in control, it's going to seem rather odd to some people, may come as a surprise. In the West, we have quite a few people who study the Tao, but who have no resources other than the typical material that is available out there. They are exposed to the typical explanation that the Tao is all about flowing like water, go with the flow, carefree wandering, which means doing whatever you please. All of that is incorrect. All of that is a drastic misdirection, distortion of the original teachings. I think that if you have been listening to these talks, delving into the actual text, figuring out what they say, have the meaning corroborate against other chapters from the same book, then you can see clearly, as I do, that the original, authentic teaching of the Tao is not like that. Not, just whatever, I'll just go along. It's much more robust and active and dynamic. It's actually got both. It's got the yin and yang aspects, where part of it is very active, very powerful, and then there's also a part that's very passive, resting, observing, downtime. It's both, because life is both. Life is not yin without yang. Life is yin and yang. That's the real Tao. So, having seen the chapter title, let's go ahead and take a look at the chapter itself. Govern a country with upright integrity. Deploy the military with surprise tactics. Take the world with non-interference. How do I know this is so? With the following. When there are many restrictions in the world, the people become more impoverished. When people have many sharp weapons, the country becomes more chaotic. When people have many clever tricks, more strange things occur. The more laws are posted, the more robbers and thieves there are. Therefore, the sage says, I take unattached action, and the people transform themselves. I prefer quiet, and the people right themselves. I do not interfere, and the people enrich themselves. I have no desires, and the people simplify themselves. So that's chapter 57. So as you're looking at this, I think it is easy to see why we have misconceptions in the West. When people read lines that say unattached action, preferring quiet, do not interfere, etc., it would seem rather simple for them to reach the conclusion that's what the Tao is all about. So to dig a little deeper, I want to point out that it actually takes a strong will and active mind focused on cultivation to refrain from interference. To not interfere is not to be inactive, is to actually keep yourself from interfering, because there's an impulse in all of us to fix that which isn't broken. I'll talk more about that when we get to that particular section. For now, though, we need to do our sectional analysis. I'm going to start with the first three lines. When you scan the first three lines up and down, I think you will see that the first character is the same for all three lines. The first two lines have the same length, 4 characters each. Line 3 is longer, but they all start with that same character. That character is translated as with, which you can see on the right-hand side. So because of grammatical difference between Chinese and English, we have to shift the preposition to the middle of the sentence, the translated sentence. So having these three lines start out the same way, that pretty much tells us that we have a small section there. So just like in 56, well, we have 2 lines in the first section. Here we have 3 lines. Okay, so what about further down? Well, the lines below don't seem to have a whole lot of repeating characters. We don't see the repeating characters until very close to the bottom, where we see quite a few repeating characters. If you look ahead to 15, 16, 17, and 18, those 4 lines are full of repeating characters. But how about before that? There doesn't seem to be a whole lot. So how do we identify the structure? Well, actually, there are repeating characters. They're just not as obvious as they usually are. Let me point them out. As you can see, they are not obvious because they're in different positions and they're not in consecutive lines. So there's a repeating character that you can see, and then you can help that by looking at the translation and understanding the meaning. You've got line 4 and line 5. How do I know this is so? With the following. Those two lines serve as introductory remarks to listing all the observations made by Lao Tzu, expressed by Lao Tzu. And those go on from line 6 all the way down to line 13. So that is how we can identify section 2. All of that is one particular thought where Lao Tzu says, well, I know that this is true because of what I see, and here's what I see. And then line 6 to line 13. So this gives us a natural division for the last section that goes from line 14 to line 18. Line 14 itself is introductory. Therefore, the sage says, and then says 4 lines. And those 4 lines, of course, have a lot of repetition. I'll start out with the first character there, 我. And the translation, as you can see on the right-hand side, is I. Now, that's not all. We have more repeating characters. You probably see them already. So in Chinese, the characters are together. Translated, because of grammatical differences, they have to be translated in different parts of the sentence, different clause, different parts in the same clause. So as I mentioned, the first character is simply I. Then we have this character here in the 4th position in this line. The first character in the group of 4 characters. That first character is and. It's a connective. Then we have the people, and that corresponds with the second character in the group of 4 characters. And then we have the character for self, which, referring to the people, is themselves. So there you are. That makes sense because it's all part of the 3rd section. So we're dealing with 3 sections here, and as usual, we're going to go through them line by line. So let's start with line 1. Got a character here that's important. This character is pronounced zhen. So zeng in pinyin is the closest that we can come to for the actual pronunciation, zhen. The meaning is upright or straight. So if you take a look at the composition, the structure of the character itself, all the lines are perpendicular. So the way that this character is made, and we can actually take this opportunity to learn how to write this particular character. It's quite easy. You start with the horizontal line on top, and then you do the vertical line going down. Then you branch off of it to the right, and then you put in a shorter vertical line to the left, and you wrap everything up with a longer horizontal line at the bottom. There are 5 strokes in this particular character. Because of that, a lot of times this character gets used for counting, because you just have to count up the number of these characters and multiply that by 5 to get a count. So for the Chinese, this serves the same purpose as the tally marks that we use in the West. By tally marks, I just mean you draw 4 lines and then you slash all of them with 1 line. Those are the tally marks, and that is also a group of 5. So it serves the same purpose. Here, though, in this particular chapter, the character is not being used for counting. It's being used for its meaning, which is, again, upright and straight. The straightness in this context is about strict self-discipline. It's about being forthright, straightforward. And I want to note that this character appears in line 1. As you see here, we're going to see it again in line 16 further down. So when we repeat a character like this, it means that it has certain significance or importance. So we'll talk about why that is. So moving on. This line says, govern a country with upright integrity. And this is where we're going to be using another concept that runs throughout these talks, and that is the realization, the understanding that whenever Lao Tzu talks about ruling a country, ruling a kingdom, it is always metaphoric, referring to the individual, that you are the ruler of your own life. So keep that in mind as we go into this. We have to talk about this line at the kingdom level, as if Lao Tzu was advising a king or emperor. We also then have to talk about at the personal level regarding yourself as the absolute ruler of your life. So at the kingdom level, Lao Tzu would say, well, the king should rule with integrity. What does that mean? Well, it means being open, being transparent with the people. The king should practice no deception whatsoever, no hiding the truth. Level with the people, they deserve the truth. The king, the ruler, should apply the law fairly, evenly, justly. So these are all part of the whole idea of governing a country with upright integrity. Then, at the personal level, how does that translate? How does that map to your life? Well, it's easy. Here, it means you should live your life, run your life, manage your life with upright integrity. And that means, first and foremost, being honest, being true to yourself, being honest with yourself. You also want to be truthful, trustworthy with other people. If you can do that, you possess upright integrity. So here's the important thing. When we talk about upright integrity, it is something that must come from within, from the inside out. It's got to be integrity from your heart, radiating outward. It is not something that can be imposed externally, like someone forces you to have integrity. Well, that's not the genuine kind of integrity. You are basically being forced to have integrity. Now, it's important because deluding yourself, self-deception, that is the quickest way to dismantle one's cultivation. In our society, we can readily observe so many people who are still living in delusion. So not to point any fingers, because we may have still some deluded ideas here and there that we need to work on, but I just want to point out it's very common. Self-deception, also very common. Deluded beliefs, extremely common. And interacting with other people, being trustworthy, being credible, worthy of belief, you want to tell it like it is. You want to talk about the world exactly being as objective as you can be, glossing over nothing, disguising nothing, skipping nothing. So integrity, extremely important. Now, in the Tao, this whole idea of governing a country, this whole idea of governance applies to different levels. And this is further reinforced in Confucian teachings, in different schools of thought, different sages that study the Tao. So I want to put the focus on governance for just a moment. I want to talk about the 3 levels of governance. Then I also want to talk about the 3 poisons that can get in the way of each of those levels of governance. In the Tao, it is always most important to start with oneself. Govern the self. It is only when you have your quote-unquote ducks in a row that you are able to exert meaningful influence on other people to help them govern their lives. So the next level beyond governing the self is to govern the family. Now, remember, govern, the word, the character can be translated in a variety of different ways depending on context. To govern the family is to manage the family, is to make it so that the family can be harmonious. Then, when you are able to do that, when there is Tao, happiness, harmony within your family, then you are ready for the next level up, which is govern the country. So anyone who is messed up as a person would have a very difficult time, of course, extending that self-governance that's flawed and faulty to straighten things out within the family or to do anything in the country. So when we see, for instance, a corrupt politician, that will be someone who has trouble governing the self. And the trouble comes from the 3 poisons. The 3 poisons is a concept that originated from Buddhism and now has become very widespread in all aspects of Eastern thought. I want to make sure everyone is exposed to what they are. So let's talk about the 3 poisons. The first poison is greed. Now, this should be familiar because we just talked about chapter 56 of the Tao Te Ching, where we spoke of those with mystic oneness are immune to being influenced by greed. So greed is definitely a toxic element that affects so many people. And it takes spiritual cultivation to get oneself away from that and to protect oneself, to be strong against it. In Tao cultivation, I spoke of the correct way to cultivate, leading to material comfort, leading to financial independence. Well, the opposite is that greed will lead to poverty. The difference between greed and poverty is actually a very thin line that is often crossed. So for the self, greed leads to poverty for oneself, for the family, the same, poverty for the family, and at the kingdom level, at the country level, greed, in the ruling class will lead to depletion of resources for the kingdom. That's the kingdom level equivalent to poverty. Then there's the second poison, which is anger. So anger, sometimes translated from the original Sanskrit as hatred, but anger is closer. It's about rage. It's about loss of control, loss of rationality, loss certainly of harmony. So when you get angry, that is a failure in self-governance. When there's anger in the home, that's a dysfunctional and abusive household. And when there's anger at the highest level in a country, at the ruling class, you end up with ill-advised, ill-conceived ventures for the country or the kingdom, resulting in defeat for the country itself. So that is the second poison, anger. It can poison so many things, has such a widespread impact. Then the third poison is ignorance. This is about delusion, confusion. Ignorance meaning you just don't get it, you don't see it, you don't understand things as they actually are, but rather you prefer to believe in a delusional conspiracy theory because it makes you feel better. We definitely see that in the world. We see that in our world. So that will be at the society level, which is equivalent to the kingdom level or the country level. Delusion, ignorance at the personal level means that you end up with deluded ideas. And you can also further extend that to cover the family. You can have misconceptions in the family that results in family members getting negative results in many different areas of life. And then when we talk about the country, when there's widespread delusional beliefs in society, it can also lead to bad policies that weaken the country instead of strengthen it. So even just with this one character, governance, there's complexities within it. And now you see it right in front of you, represented in this slide, multiple levels of governance and obstacles that can be present in each one of those three levels. So let's continue on for a little bit more before we go to the summary. Line 2, deploy the military with surprise tactics. This is a complementary line to the first line, which is to govern a country with upright integrity. So think about the difference here. What Lao Tzu is saying is that when you govern your own people or your life, you want to be straight. You want to be very honest. You want to be very transparent. But when you deploy the military, which is the opposite scenario, you don't want to be transparent. That would not be good for your military. That would not be the greatest tactic or the greatest strategy. Instead, you want to be creative. You want to come up with surprises for the enemy, things that are unexpected or unusual. So let's explore this idea a little bit. At the kingdom level, when commanding the military, use unexpected strategies and tactics. So how would you map that to personal life? We'll talk about that in just a moment. First, let me talk about why it's a bad idea to be transparent, straight when commanding the military. Usually, when you have a head-on clash, a confrontation of armies, that is the worst idea of all because it is the battle of attrition. It is where you have the greatest loss of life. But instead, if you are able to be creative in your attacks, in your defense, you can achieve your objectives with far less loss of lives. So creativity becomes important. So for instance, if you make use of surprise, the elements of surprise, you have a good chance of defeating a larger force without expending a larger force of your own. So what about the personal level? Well, it's all about being creative in your life. Here, the military, when you map it to one's personal existence, I think it becomes pretty easy to see that this is about contention in life. Let's explore that a little bit. So at the personal level, make use of creativity in your life. The military being a symbol for contention, arguments, tangling with other people. So when we say unusual tactics, surprise tactics, at the personal level, what it means is that you want to use tactics that most people don't know or won't do. For instance, being the bigger person in an argument to apologize first. A lot of people won't do that. So here, the military metaphor is that you can be attacking a problem in your life. Now, it doesn't have to be a problem. There can be a project that you work on, and we talk about it that way too. We talk about attacking a project, taking on a project. When that is the case, you definitely want to use creative thinking, help you do more with less. You may be able to work smarter instead of harder by using creativity. Now, when it comes to creativity, I have a couple of generic ideas to offer. Number one is to note that there are always multiple ways to solve a particular problem. This is something that we know from experience. If you look back to the past, think about some of the problems you encountered before. You know, hindsight is always 20/20. So when we look back, it's easy to see that a particular problem could have been solved in different ways. That's how it is in real life. Usually, there wouldn't be just one single solution. Therefore, you want to, second bullet, maintain an open mind for a completely different approach. And oftentimes, it's closed-mindedness that prevents one from seeing the different approach. Like, the thinking that, oh, it's impossible. It's an impossible problem. It's an impossible obstacle. Or there's only one way to do it, and it is this. That closed-mindedness defeats us even before we start. So instead of being mired in that closed-mindedness, I want to suggest the better way is to ask, what if? How about this? How about that? What other options are there? What else can I do? Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us all travel safely so we can meet again. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.